welcome to the Lighthouse. My name is Mari Curtano, and today I'm here with my guest, Marcelo Oleas, who is actually back. We had another episode with Marcelo, so if you haven't seen that one, I'm going to put it at the end of this video. And Marcelo today is going to talk about how relationships are helping us to get closer to ourselves. So how we learn through a relationship to understand ourselves better and to develop ourselves and to get closer to who we truly are. So welcome, Marcelo. It's great to have you back again.
Mari, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, and I appreciate you bringing me back again. And I'm looking forward to sharing our experiences.
Wonderful. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that, because we just had a little talk before and you said that this is like the core thing that you believe, that relationships are actually helping us to understand ourselves better and to get closer to who we truly are. So
absolutely. Okay, so what I have learned is that it's very easy to point fingers, right? And put blame on others. And what I personally learned from a relationship from many years ago, that it was not a healthy relationship. And it started changing my core value, my core personality of who I was as a person. I've always been a happy, optimistic type of individual. And then during that time in my life, I was waking up angry. I was holding a lot of grudges, and clearly we were not meant to be together, right? Me and this person, and we stayed together a lot longer than we should have, right? And even after her and I broke up, like, I was still holding so much anger that I would wake up and still had the same feelings, and that's when I started realizing, I was like, okay, look, when we were in the relationship, it was easy for me to blame her for things that maybe were disturbing my business, taking time away from my business. And she had her requirements, and in a relationship, it's give and take, right? But sometimes we give a lot more than we should, right? And the other person doesn't understand that, right? Because they're all about the taking. And so it was very easy. If something happened not as planned with my business, oh, it was because of her, so it was very easy for me to blame. And that made me realize that, okay, I'm not taking ownership on things that I could myself avoid or do differently, so that things in my business, for example, would not have gone bad in certain situations, right? So and that's kind of how I got started into this whole sharing of motivational content, and at that time, it was primarily on Facebook. This was before Instagram and stuff. And it was a tool. It was a personal tool that I was using for myself, because I wanted to be held accountable, right? I woke up one day and I was like, look, Marcelo, you can't keep blaming someone else. You can't keep blaming her. You are no longer in that relationship. This is all on you now, right? So
one quick question. So you were in this relationship, and then the relationship ended, and you woke up one day saying that I have to change myself, or you were still in the relationship?
No, I was in the relationship, and it was, once I got out of the relationship, I was carrying the emotional baggage, that anger that I had while I was in the relationship, towards the end of the relationship, obviously, because in the beginning everything is beautiful, right? But towards the end of it, I was carrying a lot of that emotional baggage once we broke up, right? And weeks went by, months went by, and I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why am I still waking up? Why am I still feeling this anger that has never existed in me, right? And that's when I started realizing, okay, I can't keep blaming somebody else. This is now all on me. She's no longer part of my life, so why am I still feeling this? I am the one who has to change this, right? And the motivational stuff was just one of my tools that I used, because I wanted to be held accountable. So I would post positive stuff that I'm constantly learning and sharing. And I did it for very personal reasons. I did it so that people who who are close to me, right? People who genuinely know me, who actually see me, who talk to me outside of social media or outside of the internet world, so that they can see what I'm posting. And then when they see me in person, they're like, whoa, you're preaching one thing, but you are acting completely different, right? So I did that to be held accountable so that people could call me out, right? And I started doing it, and little by little, I started getting back to my core, my happiness, you know, waking up with joy, waking up with gratitude. And you know, it was a tool that was very helpful for me. But initially, the core of what initiated that change was me realizing that I was the one who had control of this, and I needed to take ownership, and I needed to stop blaming her or any other source around me, because it was all on me. I had the power to make this change, right? So there is nobody else that's going to do it for me. I'm the one who has to do it.
Of course, that's wonderful. But my question would now be like, do you remember what was that initial, what created this ripple effect? I mean, was there an event where this just, you just woke up with this feeling, you just woke up with this thought, or was there something that happened that made you take this decision that, all right, I got to take ownership of this?
Yeah, it wasn't an aha moment, like, let's just say. It was more like a transition. Because like I said, even after we were out of the relationship, weeks went by, a couple of months went by, and I just still, and I think just because, like, in my core, I am not that type of person, that's why it bothered me more, right? I just didn't know how to like get rid of it, how to get back to myself. And
back to balance.
Yeah, like
your body, your every being, everything in your being wanted to get you back to balance.
exactly. And the thing was that, like, it took time for me. That, I think, was my catalyst. It was the time that I was like, okay, it's been a week, it's been 2 weeks, it's been 3 weeks, it's been like 2 months, right? And I'm like, she's not in my life, you know, like, why am I still feeling it? It's like, oh, wait a minute, you know, it's not that simply that we separated, right? So now it's me taking the ownership of making that change in my life, right? That excuse that I had, you know, that it was very easy for me to just put the blame on somebody and not try to make the change myself, right? I no longer had that crutch, right? Because that's what it was. It was just a crutch. It's like, oh no, I can't do it because of her. I can't do this because of her. I'm this because of her. I'm mad because of her. I no longer had that crutch. You know, so and it took time for me to actually realize that.
Figure out, yes, because initially you think, okay, I'm going to eliminate this person from my life, and I know everything is going to be fine after that because they are the problem, right? But eventually we realize that they are mirroring something, of course, and there is electricity and emotion between two. And when I say emotion, I don't mean positive or negative. Emotions are emotions, but when there is a charge, like you say, I was very charged. There was some exchange of information there between the two ends, but you eventually got that in the process, which is natural. Most people do that in that way. And so how long did it take you to, like I said, to figure it out?
It was like a month and a half, 2 months for me to start the process, you know, like, because it was, it took time for me to eventually get back to what made me feel normal again, made me happy again, right? But yeah, like, the moment that I decided, I was like, when I realized, oh, it's me, I'm the one who has to take the ownership and start taking physical action, right? And not only for myself, but that's why I decided to do it public. I started to post positive things out there, right? Just so that literally I could get, I could be held accountable. Literally, I didn't care. I wanted people, hey, Marcelo, like, you're preaching this, but like, you're acting completely different. You're not who you're pretending to be, right? So little by little, that's what got me. And I would say, like, luckily, you know, because, like, it was so in my core that it didn't take months for me to start getting back to myself and feeling happy again. But it was definitely a couple of weeks of me being consistent, right? I was very consistent. It wasn't just kind of like, hey, I don't feel like doing this. No, I did it every morning. You know, it was part of my morning, became part of my
What did
morning
you do every
routine.
morning? What was that thing that you did every morning?
Shit, like thinking about something positive, posting it, whether it was a quote, whether it was, you know, like a short video, just sharing thoughts. I wanted to start my day, instead of carrying those negative thoughts in my head, I was like, okay, I'm going to disrupt it. And
Mhm.
I want to put something positive, but not just think it. I wanted to take it a level beyond. I wanted to do something physical, right?
Yes.
So me posting it, me creating the content was that physical action that I needed to start rewiring my thoughts.
Yeah, because that's how you rewire your brain. Obviously, you need to um, understand what is distracting you, if you may, and what is
Hmm.
causing the imbalance, and then you take the opposite action, obviously, to counteract, if you may. That's wonderful. And what what now, looking back at this, let's say this relationship, but I'm sure people understand different things from different relationships. um, if you could look back at this situation, what is something that actually you realize that it actually helped you? And if it wasn't for that, you wouldn't be able to see and understand it today and be maybe even part of who you are, because that relationship might have mirrored something back to you, and that made you shift things around.
Right. Yeah. Um, I think a lot of it was being genuine, being honest, right? And I don't mean honest with the other person, because, like, you know, that's I to me, that's a core, one of my core values, right?
Yes.
Just honesty, but being honest with myself, right?
Mm.
And that is one of the biggest things that I think cause issues in relationships, right? We're constantly trying to do what we think our partner wants, what we think is going to please them, but we're doing it at the expense of our own happiness, right? And that sometimes makes us feel good, because we obviously like to see our partners happy, right? But in the long term, it's it's going to backfire, right?
Yes,
Because if
definitely.
we're not fueling our filling up our tank also, you know, it's going to get to a point where we have nothing else, and like we just become depleted, right?
Very
And that is
true.
not healthy.
And when you become depleted, you become resentful. You start to build a sense of resentment. And the resentment is not necessarily because you are making the other person happy and you are trying to, we assume the responsibility of the happiness of the other person. So we want to make sure we please them and they're happy. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, like you said, it gets to a point where it overrides your inner values or your authenticity. Like you said, I wasn't honest with myself, so I had to kind of. So there is a difference between, what's the word now? The word is escaping. In relationship, you have to. What people say, it's a word with a C. Geez, I have a slap. A C. You have to compromise or something.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. This is what people say in general. But if it becomes to the point that it overrides your core, your inner value,
Right.
and it makes you depleted, of course, like you were saying here, it means that it turns into resentment. And over time, it's
And
going
that's
to.
literally what happened to me. That's why I
Mhm.
was holding that anger, right?
Yeah.
Because it turned into horrible resentment.
Mhm.
And that's literally what was the scenario. I became depleted. It was a lot of give and give, and yeah, I got to the point where it was just like, okay, I got nothing else to give, and my tank ran empty,
Yes.
right? But hey, I allowed it. I should have
Yeah.
never allowed that, you know?
Yes, you obviously, for that to happen, you participated in it. And I know many people can relate because we want to create peace. We have a certain image or a fantasy sometimes about how relationships should be. And
Hmm.
we play this role, and in the end, we get burnt, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And like one of the major things that I also learned is that um a lot of the time in relationships, we're looking to fill a void, right? And that is I think one of the biggest problems, right? It's it could be satisfying in the beginning, right? Because you're like, you feel that void that we feel that we have, and all of a sudden it's getting filled, right?
Mm.
But then it's kind of like, what I learned is that, look, we should never be trying to use an outside source to fill our voids. We are capable of having that be full before we get involved with anybody. And then when we do get involved with somebody, it becomes a compliment. We compliment them, they compliment us, right? We're not looking for that dependent, we're not, because we become dependent on constantly needing an outside source to
Yes.
make us feel what we think is happy, right? When in reality, we are the ones that create our own happiness. And I think that was one of the major things that I learned too, is like, look, I need to be 100% happy with myself. I need to have full self-love, right? Because when I have that, I will treat my relationships in ways that I would never be able to do if those things are depleted,
Yeah.
and I think that's the important part. And like, also, like years ago, I read the 5 love languages, right? And another thing that I learned with that, not only is it important for us to know what our personal primary love languages are, right? Because it makes it easier for us to communicate, right, with our partners. What are the things that we appreciate at higher levels, right? But once we know that, the other very important part, which I went through bumpy roads learning this too, right? Is that, okay, I know what my love languages are, which
But
are my
now,
primary love language, but we need to learn that just because that is what we feel the strongest doesn't mean that the other person, shares the same level of appreciation with that type of love language. So the important part is to understand ours, but also understand theirs, so that we could feed the love to them, the appreciation to them, in the way that is the most meaningful to them.
yeah, that's beautiful. It's what you just said earlier about complementing each other as opposed to trying to use the other person to fill your void. And I feel that, to be honest, that all of us, in a way or another, are driven by what we perceive to be our voids. Because
Right.
we perceive there is a void. And I say perceived because it is perceived. And this is because of something that happens usually during early stages of childhood. Let's say there is a seed event for the first time whenever this happened. And so when we have some perception about that experience, something shifts within us and we create these ideas about yourself, about you, or about me in that moment. Oh, I mustn't be that good enough. So I have a void, so I need to become better. And so therefore you're going to do things in your relationships that are trying to fill that void, to avoid feeling that way. But like you said, it's a cycle, and unless you become aware
Absolutely.
that if you grab onto a partner as because you want them to fill your void, I think it's sometimes you don't even see them because it's all about you and your void, isn't it?
That's 100% what it is, and that is not a nice balance. That is completely off balance, so
It's
that does not lead to
codependency,
a
isn't
healthy
it?
relationship.
Yeah, it's
know?
not a healthy
And that's
way.
why, like, another thing and once we become aware of this, I think
Mhm.
we become very conscious of, like, even the minute things that make a significant difference. The
Yeah,
language that we use, how we speak, the thoughts that we have, the words that we say to ourselves, right? And like an example is that it's a phrase that's thrown so loosely out there, and it's endearing, right? We
yeah.
sometimes, when we're referring to our partners, like, oh, I gotta go ask my better half, right? It's
Mm.
we don't mean anything bad by it, right? I think, and a
No,
lot of the times, we say it just because we have heard it for so many years that we don't even take the true significance of those words, and we just say it because we hear everybody saying it, right?
very true.
But just those words, like, those are so powerful. We are subconsciously telling ourselves that we are not good enough, that we need our better half. Like, no, that
Mhm.
is so wrong, you know? Um, And that goes back to what I said about complimenting. It's like, look, we are our better half, and once we have that self-love, that inner respect, that inner loyalty for our own selves, then it's like it makes a world of a difference, when we share that partnership with somebody else, because like we're complimenting, it all comes back to complimenting, like that I think is the ideal thing, complimenting who the other person is, fortifying their strengths, complementing their strengths. And of course, where there is going to be parts that we all need a hand, right? And it's nice to have that partner to mutually be able to help each other in those needs, right? But it should never be as we are dependent on them,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the times is when and yes, sometimes it's like, most of the time it's because of things that we experience in our childhood, that we perceive ourselves in certain ways, right? And it's so much easier, I think, and this was kind of like goes back to like my dilemma that I had after I broke up with that relationship, that I was carrying it for weeks, right? Is that it's so much easier for us to try to find a solution through an outside source instead of us working on it from inside.
Yeah, it's very true. People try to fix, like, somebody on the outside is the problem. I'm going to cut them out of my life so my life will be better. And then they say, oh, I think this person is going to fix my void, so I'm going to bring this person in. And because at the beginning, and this is a perpetuating, like you said, it just continues, because at the beginning of the relationship, we only exaggerate, we only see the positives, and we completely oversee the other parts, because we are all human beings and we all have more positive and more negative, if you want, but we all have different traits. When we can't be always happy, we can't be always kind, we can't be always giving. Sometimes we have a bad day, but when you compliment yourself with the other, they understand that you're having a better day, so they're going to be like complimenting that for you. Again, is because understanding that no relationship should always be there. There is this perception and this fantasy that partners should always have the same values, the same things, the same thoughts, the same beliefs, the same actions, but it's impossible. Because it doesn't exist. And that's why when people at the beginning, like you said, everything is beautiful and everything is sunny and shiny, but then things start to shift because you begin to notice other things. And yeah, there's an expectation that other people should fix or help me. Like you said, trying to fix an internal void with an external thing. That's never really working, whether it's a person or it's food or chemicals or wine. It doesn't feel in, does it?
Right. And then, like, very similar to let's say if it's a chemical thing, right? We might do something, whether it be like, let's say, just to say alcohol, and in the beginning it could be a glass of wine, one drink, a beer, right? And then our tolerance starts to increase, and it gets, so all of a sudden the same thing goes for everything. All of a sudden we start, it takes a lot more of that, to make us feel like we're satisfied, right? And that's when you get into that really big cycle, because you're never really fixing the issue, not getting to the root of the issue.
It's true. It's what I like to use as an example with people when I share about this, is like you trying to cope. It's a coping mechanism. And a coping mechanism means you see the weed, you remove the leaves, but then the roots are still under there. So eventually it will come up in another way, in another form, through another person, through another situation. And that's when
that's the thing. Sometimes those roots, I mean, they grow in strength too, right? So now all of a sudden, you could have easily plucked those weeds in the beginning, right? But now those weeds are coming stronger, now, and that's the thing, so it's like, unless, you change the actual source of it, you're going to need stronger and stronger and stronger outside sources to try to remedy it.
That's very true. I love that. I love that point, that actually the roots are getting stronger every time. So obviously the thing comes back stronger. And again, it's all about having the courage to look within and take responsibility for your life, take ownership and say, look, I can point the finger outside, but it's not going to help them. It's not going to help me. It's not going to change the situation. So the point is, am I willing? Am I open? Am I willing to actually look at this from within and do something about it, and accept, like you said, my own part of this process, my own actions.
Right.
That's
And
wonderful.
like the beautiful thing is that with roots, they do get stronger, right? But
Mhm.
it could go either way. The roots could become stronger in that they feed the weeds more and more, and it takes more outside external sources to take care of those weeds, to eliminate those weeds. But also it's like if we get down to the source and start feeding that root with the proper things, that root becomes so strong that no weeds could ever grow from it, right? So it's just feeding the root the correct way.
It's, yeah, that's beautiful. It's basically about transforming, or whatever is there. When you have the courage to look at it and to see it, to understand it, and to process it, you'll be able to transform it and then integrate it as a solid foundation for your future, as opposed to trying to get rid of it. Because a lot of people try to get rid of their past. They try to oh, I need to get rid of that, let go, forget. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. However, it somehow seems to chase you. And what I found from my own work and from working with people and from experience is that, like you said, you need to treat that root in a way that it can become your foundation, transform it and use it as a solid foundation to build your future. And that is about integrating your past with your present, and
Absolutely.
is about having the willingness and openness to actually look within and do something, like you did. So that,
Absolutely. And like our roots should always be our allies, right? Not our enemies. They should not work against us. So when we feed those roots properly, they are our best army ever.
very true, very true. It's all about how we perceive that these roots are, isn't it? If we perceive it's an
Mhm.
enemy, if we perceive the world is a bad place, if we perceive our partner is your fault, you are the fault, right? um,
Mhm.
like you said in your story, so it's not really helping anybody. It's the
Absolutely.
outlook you have about life. So what would you tell our listeners that are struggling in relationships right now, or they're struggling with with themselves? Sometimes, when you're not too confident, when you don't feel too confident about yourself, you're trying to please other people, and maybe you turn into overgiving, like you said, to the point where you deplete yourself. And because you have been in that space, what would you tell people today?
I think the best thing that anybody and everybody could do and should do is to work on to nurture our self-love, right? And an exercise that I love doing is, and it was awkward at first, especially when we struggle with self-love sometimes, right? But every morning is part of my morning ritual, and it has extended to, like, it just happens, right? But I started in the morning where I'm up brushing my teeth, getting ready, and
Mhm.
looking in the mirror, I genuinely look into my eyes and I say, I love you, you know? And the first couple of times it was it was like, oh, that's silly. It just didn't feel like natural. It didn't feel right, right? You got to stick with it, go through that like discomfort, go through that awkwardness, and keep at it, saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. And like genuinely look into your eyes and believe it, right?
Yes.
And then it just clicks. It just clicks. And once we start nurturing that self-love, like that is the best foundation that you could ever have to build any relationship. Because once you have that self-love, it's like there's nothing that could like tumble. I don't say, take that back. When you have that self-love so nurtured in the correct way, your
Mhm.
chances are, because there's always too many factors, right, that we can't control, but
Yes.
we're building a home on a solid foundation that could withstand the storms, in a stronger way. So that to me is the best thing, especially when we feel like we have to give, or we feel like we have to do what the other person wants. That is a lack of self-confidence, a lack of self-love. Once we fill that up, it's beautiful. And then like now it's like literally, and this is not in a like because your ego is big. No, this is something that's very personal. You do it for yourself. Whenever I see in the mirror, sometimes even when I'm driving and I glance, my eyes happen to catch my eyes catch myself in my rearview mirror. Take an opportunity for any moment that you have to make that connection with yourself and say, I love you. I love you, you know, it feels amazing.
It's beautiful. I like to do that. And I look at, when I look at myself, sometimes I don't do it all the time. I have to admit, you know, I'm not like you. I don't do it every day. But sometimes when I do that, it's about catching that light in your eyes, isn't it? Is that just that little light at the core of your eye? That is really sometimes, if you can ever try this. I mean, if I try this sometimes, and it helps when you know, the sun is out or whatever, and you look in the mirror and you can actually look at that dot of light in your eyes. There is something about that just
I mean, I'm literally getting chills right now because I remember the first time that it happened for me, you know, and it's just like such a feeling that like, wow, I believe it, you know, it is true. You know, those words that I was just saying that really felt funny, felt silly, didn't have significance for me at first. Now it has the most significance because I genuinely felt it in my heart, you know, and that's when that clicks. And I can't recommend it enough. And like I said, it's awkward a little bit in the beginning. Just stick to it. Like it is so worth it.
So that just very simple thing of just acknowledging yourself and looking at yourself in the mirror, in that light in your eye, and just acknowledge and feel the love and say it, actually, because it's important to vocalize it, you know.
Once we start saying it, then we start believing it, you know, and then we don't rely, we don't become so dependent on outside sources, you know.
That's so true. That's so true. And then we can become truly sharing your love with other people, because when you look for something outside of you to feel love, thinking that something outside of you is going to make you feel love or loved, then is that truly love? It's more codependency, isn't it? So
exactly, and that's the thing. Once we have that self-love nurtured so well, we don't feel bad by expressing like, hey, this is who I am, these are my core values, and actually defending them, right? And that's how we are able to find the people that we're supposed to be surrounded with. You know, we're being true to ourselves, we're being genuine, we're being honest to ourselves. And once we start doing that, we will be surrounded by the right people that complement that, then we complement them.
Yeah, it's beautiful. What a beautiful way to end this, because I do also believe, as you, that once you find that point of balance, inner balance and authenticity within yourself, when you are in that space, it's almost as if you unlocked your gravity and you start to, the right people, like you said, start to gravitate towards you naturally, because when you aren't unlocked, then the people that you need in order to go back to balance will show up in your life. That's why sometimes people say, you know, oh, this always happens to me, the same old story over and over again. Well, there is a message in there. I always say to people, you know, things are showing up in your life because they need to be acknowledged. If you don't acknowledge them, they'll keep coming back to you. So don't push them away, right? So yeah, it's all about finding that inner balance in a beautiful way.
And when we think about it, it makes our life not just more fulfilling, it makes it so much easier because we're being us, we're being genuine with who we are. We're not pretending. We don't have to pretend. Pretending is hard work.
Oh my God, it's really challenging.
Yeah. So why do that to ourselves? Let's just be genuine, and then the right people will come to us. That's just how it is.
It's true, because it takes away so much from your energy, and you don't really live in the moment when you're worrying about what other people will say, what other people will do, how other people will react, and so on and so forth. You're really absent. You're not able to be present because you're stressing about what's happening in your environment and how to smooth everything out, right?
And then why there's no reason for that relationship, you know, to go long term, because after a while, like you will get tired of pretending, you know, you will lose yourself, and sometimes you will convert into somebody that you're not, you know, and then like that is just like a recipe for like, okay, no, it's not going to work in the long term, you know. So from the beginning, start with being true to your core values and build that foundation, you know, build that house on a solid foundation, and you will increase your odds for like happiness, for fulfillment, you know, mutually, for everybody. This is not even in romantic relationships. This goes for just
Totally.
relationships in general, you know?
Very true, very true. So it's about when you do what you just said, you know, when you continue to be in a relationship that is not really, you are not really authentic to it, you really kind of gonna lose yourself. So it's about whether you want to choose the road of the road of losing yourself eventually, or you want to start with being authentic, and then everything else is gonna gravitate towards you, and the people that are meant to be with you are you just gonna complement each other. Wow, how beautiful. My God, Marcelo, this was really good. Is there anything else that you'd like to share as a last word before we say goodbye to everyone today?
Yeah, something that we kind of like touched on, like the word got scattered here and there, was like expectations, right? We sometimes have expectations, and that's another like double-edged sword, right? When we expect things, that's when we, you know, get into trouble, because when those things aren't there, then we're like, uh-oh, you know. Appreciating what we're expecting is the way to go.
It's true. So because also expectations turn into, they become you demand, you start to demand things. There is expectations, and there it turns into, okay, you owe me this, you know, you should be doing this, you know, and people become demanding. And when you become demanding, it's as if you just, you know, you just think you, everybody owns you something, you know, and that's
Right.
again another,
That's not healthy. Yeah.
yeah, side turn that we take as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's very true. So yes,
Absolutely.
indeed, expectations is another one that leads to disappointment and to conflicts and to a lot of challenges in relationships, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's very true. Well, thank you so much, Marcelo. It
Thank
was
you.
wonderful to have you again. I hope everyone enjoyed this amazing conversation. There is so much gold to get from that. So I'm going to put Marcelo's details below. And also, if you want to see his previous episode where he talks about the accident that he had at 17, which was an incredible accident, and how he made it out of that is still like out of this world. But anyway, thank you again for watching. I hope you found this useful. Stay tuned for more on the Lighthouse coming soon. Thank you.